The morning light cut through the fog over Lower Silesia, revealing the fractured mouth of a tunnel sealed for nearly 80 years. Inside, rusted rails vanished into darkness. The air was stale, heavy with dust and oil. As floodlights flickered on, the silhouette of a locomotive emerged, armored, silent, and entombed in concrete. Its insignia, faint but unmistakable, the Black Eagle of the Reich. What began as a rumor of Nazi gold had become something far darker, a discovery that would force historians, soldiers, and scientists alike to ask, what else was buried with it? Chapter 1. The Forgotten Labs of Operation Echo. Before the war began, Germany was a country obsessed with the future. Factories hummed day and night, fueled by visions of power and precision. Engineers dreamed of machines that could outpace time itself. The hum of turbines, the gleam of polished steel. It was a nation preparing for a kind of progress the world had never seen and would soon come to fear. By the late 1930s, Adolf Hitler's ambition had turned laboratories into extensions of the battlefield. Scientists, some brilliant and others desperate, were ordered to design weapons that would secure a 1,000-year Reich. Funding poured into aviation, chemistry, acoustics, anything that might deliver a decisive advantage. The pursuit of supremacy wasn't just military, it was ideological. Every invention was seen as proof of destiny, every experiment a step toward domination. In cities like Munich and Dresden, research divisions sprouted under code names that concealed their true nature. Echo was one of them. Officially, it didn't exist. Unofficially, it was a joint effort between naval engineers and physicists under the Abwehr, Germany's military intelligence. Their goal, to silence the sea, to render submarines invisible not by light but by sound. At the time, sonar was still primitive. British and American scientists were refining early detection arrays. The Kriegsmarine needed a way to counter it. Inside the hidden labs of Operation Echo, sound became a weapon and a shield. The walls of the underground facility were lined with copper wiring and quartz plates, designed to absorb and distort echoes. A submarine could pass within miles of an enemy destroyer, its sound signature twisted into silence. But progress came with a price. Wartime Germany had no shortage of resources stolen from occupied lands: metals, chemicals, and, most tragically, people. Laborers from across Europe were forced underground, ordered to build and maintain the facility. Few ever left. Those who did spoke in whispers of strange vibrations, of bodies that trembled for hours after the machines were turned off, of scientists who never surfaced again. Above ground, life continued with the rhythm of war. Cities burned, soldiers marched, and the machinery of conquest pressed on. The public was fed stories of victory and technological triumphs. No one asked how those victories were achieved. No one wanted to know. In the final months of the war, as Allied bombers turned the skies above Munich red, Echo's project directors received a single radio order: terminate and seal. Witnesses later claimed the tunnels were flooded, the entrances welded shut. The remaining staff vanished, their names erased from military rosters. It was as if the program had never existed. For decades, the silence held. Germany rebuilt, the world moved forward, and Operation Echo slipped into myth. But myths have a way of echoing, faintly, persistently, through time. In 2023, when a construction crew broke through the reinforced ceiling of an old storage facility, the sound that greeted them wasn't silence. It was the faint hum of machines that hadn't been touched in 80 years, still running on backup power. The discovery would shake the foundations of post-war history. Within weeks, German intelligence, British archives, and American defense agencies quietly assembled joint teams to study what had been found. Inside the bunker, rows of glass slides were discovered. Images of acoustic waveforms, sonar shadows, and human skulls marked with reference codes. The scientists of Echo hadn't just tested machinery, they had tested people. Historians reviewing the recovered data were struck by one unsettling detail. The technology described was far ahead of its time, concepts of sound manipulation that would not appear in open research until the 1970s were already being modeled in 1944. It suggested that Echo's scientists had stumbled upon something extraordinary, a method of bending sound through layered interference fields. In simpler terms, they had found a way to hide in plain hearing. The implications rippled outward. Declassified US Navy files from the early Cold War revealed diagrams eerily similar to Echo's recovered blueprints. Names of consultants matched the aliases of former German engineers relocated through Operation Paperclip. Somewhere between surrender and secrecy, the knowledge had survived, passed through hands, traded for immunity, repurposed for a new kind of war, the silent one beneath the seas. And so the story began again. What started as a wartime experiment had become a global inheritance of secrecy. The forgotten labs of Operation Echo were no longer just a relic of Nazi ambition. They were a mirror reflecting how far nations will go to bury the truth, and how deep the echoes of history can travel when no one is listening. Chapter 2. Vault 7. The Arctic Listening Post. The Cold War was not fought only in the skies or through the barrels of guns. It was fought in silence, through signals, frequencies, and whispers that crossed borders faster than bullets ever could. By the late 1950s, the world had learned that information was the new weapon. And in that shadowed contest between East and West, the Arctic became more than frozen wasteland. It became a battlefield of sound. At the height of Soviet power, the KGB sought to control every decibel of the polar frontier. Beneath the guise of meteorological research, they began constructing a chain of secret installations across the northern ice. Most were small, mere relay outposts disguised as weather stations. But one was something else entirely. Its codename was Vault 7. Built near the Svalbard archipelago, deep within the permafrost, Vault 7 was designed to be undetectable by satellite. It was a listening post, a subterranean labyrinth of steel corridors, antenna chambers, and cryogenic storage bays. Engineers poured concrete in temperatures that could freeze flesh in seconds. Supplies were dropped by unmarked aircraft. No record of its construction appeared in Soviet archives. The site existed only on redacted schematics buried in a forgotten intelligence branch that even Moscow pretended not to know. Inside, life was mechanical, precise, and paranoid. Operators worked 12-hour shifts monitoring encrypted transmissions from Western fleets. They catalogued every ping of sonar, every shift in frequency, every unexplained silence. One operator's journal, recovered decades later, described the isolation as a silence that listens back. He wrote of vibrations in the walls, faint, rhythmic, almost like breathing. His final entry ended mid-sentence. Vault 7's mission went far beyond surveillance. Recent analysis of its surviving equipment revealed something extraordinary. Long-range acoustic sensors capable of detecting submarine movement thousands of kilometers away. The design used copper resonance, coils that shouldn't have existed at that level of sophistication in the 1960s. Some experts now believe the technology was a direct descendant of research, stolen from German archives after the war, perhaps even linked to Operation Echo. As tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union escalated, the Arctic became a chessboard of hidden listening posts and secret tests. Nuclear submarines prowled beneath the ice, each side daring the other to blink first. The men stationed at Vault 7 were not soldiers in the traditional sense. They were ears for a state that trusted no one, not even its own. In 1986, as permafrost began to shift and political winds changed in Moscow, a single transmission was sent from Vault 7 to Central Command. It read only, "Listening complete, initiating closure," then nothing. Satellite records show the base's thermal signature fading over 3 days. When Norwegian meteorological teams later surveyed the area, they found no trace of activity, no personnel, and no response from the supposed research station. The official explanation was meteorological collapse, a vague phrase that never appeared in Soviet vocabulary before or since. And so Vault 7 vanished beneath the ice. For 3 decades, the world forgot it existed. The Cold War ended. The Soviet Union dissolved. The Arctic thawed. Until 2019, when a Norwegian climate expedition drilling core samples near Svalbard hit metal. A steel hatch sealed tight, marked only by a serial code and a faded hammer and sickle emblem. When the hatch was opened, the first thing they felt was warmth. The chamber below had preserved itself, its systems still running on residual power from an ancient nuclear battery. Inside lay miles of coiled wiring, rusted transmitters, and shelves of reel-to-reel tapes, each marked with numeric codes and dates spanning from 1958 to 1986. The air smelled faintly of ozone and iron. There were no bodies. The discovery drew immediate attention from intelligence communities around the world. Norway sealed the site within hours, citing environmental hazards. But satellite images showed convoys of unmarked vehicles heading toward the glacier. Within days, the hatch was buried again, officially for safety reasons. Unofficially, Analysts say the recordings recovered from Vault 7 contained something far more valuable than environmental data. Among them were transmissions never meant for human ears. Coded communications between submarines that no one ever admitted existed, and frequencies that still, to this day, cannot be decoded. One archivist described hearing a constant rhythmic pulse beneath the static, as if the machines were still listening. Historians now suspect that Vault 7 was part of a broader KGB initiative known as Project MIR-7, a network of hidden listening nodes placed along the Arctic Rim. Its true purpose remains buried under layers of redacted documents and modern political denial. But what fragments remain suggest that the Soviets weren't just eavesdropping on Western navies. They were mapping the very soundscape of the Earth, building an acoustic atlas of the oceans themselves. Perhaps the most unsettling revelation came from a fragment of microfilm recovered from the site's archives. The reel contained a photograph, grainy, unfocused, yet unmistakable, of the same sonar waveform first recorded at the German Echo facility in 1944. Somehow, across decades and ideologies, one secret had survived another war, only to be buried again in the ice. In the end, Vault 7 was never about what was heard. It was about what was meant to stay silent, a relic of a time when fear drove nations to listen to everything, except the truth. Chapter 3: The Vanishing Files of Operation Blackwater. By 1952, the United States was no longer the land of quiet victory parades and factory whistles. It was a nation on edge. The Cold War had seeped into every living room, every newspaper headline, every whispered conversation about loyalty and fear. To most Americans, the threat was distant, somewhere across an ocean, in a Kremlin office, or a mushroom cloud on the horizon. But inside the Pentagon's Psychological Operations Division, the threat was much closer, in the human mind. Operation Blackwater began as a theory. Could a population be conditioned to remain calm during the unthinkable nuclear annihilation? Military psychologists believed they could shape collective behavior through simulation. The premise was simple, on paper: simulate a nuclear alert, monitor civilian reactions, refine emergency protocols. But simplicity ended there. The operation was classified eyes only. Few in government even knew it existed. Those who did were told it was a national resilience program. In truth, it was a covert test of mass psychological endurance, one that would be conducted not in laboratories or training grounds, but in real towns, under real fear. The first test site was a small Midwestern community called Ashford. Population 2,300, a quiet grid of brick houses and grain silos, the perfect American town, and the perfect control group. In late autumn, residents began noticing odd occurrences. The air raid siren would sound at random hours. Radio stations went dead, replaced by monotone voices reading evacuation orders. Soldiers in unmarked trucks appeared at the edge of town, assisting local police. No one was told why. According to recently uncovered field notes, Phase 1 of Operation Blackwater ran for 12 days. During that time, the town's communication lines were intermittently cut, supply deliveries halted, and rumors seeded through planted informants. The objective: to observe how long it would take for panic to become paralysis. Observers noted diminishing group coordination, decline in trust of authority, and, chillingly, rapid civilian submission after perceived threat amplification. When the test concluded, the participants were told it had been a civil defense drill. The data was filed under weather emergency studies, and the operation moved to its next site. In the decades that followed, whispers of Blackwater surfaced among intelligence insiders. Files appeared and disappeared. Names were redacted. The official record claimed the project was cancelled in 1953, its findings inconclusive. But in 2021, the discovery of a single box at a Virginia estate sale tore that version of history apart. Inside were water-damaged documents stamped with the project's insignia, a black wave over a white horizon. Handwritten notes referred to Phase 7 Terminal Calm Initiative, and among them, a list of towns that never appeared on any official map. Forensic reconstruction of the papers revealed a startling pattern. Each location coincided with communities later absorbed by industrial or military development. Erased from geography under the guise of progress, census data vanished. Residents relocated. The pattern was too deliberate to ignore. One document, partially legible through ultraviolet scanning, referenced saturation broadcasts. It described mobile transmitters hidden in water towers, transmitting subaudible tones designed to influence emotional response. a precursor to modern psychological warfare techniques. The tones were tested during simulated crises. Their frequency range matched signals later used in Cold War intelligence communication systems. It wasn't just a behavioral test. It was field data for weaponized psychology. Historians reviewing the files found one particularly haunting entry. Subject families demonstrating prolonged obedience beyond test termination. Recommend observation. That note was dated months after the operation supposedly ended. Witnesses who lived in those towns, few still alive, recall sensations they could never explain. Sudden anxiety, restless nights, a constant low hum that seemed to come from nowhere. One elderly woman, interviewed in 2022, described it this way. It wasn't fear, it was quiet. Too quiet, like the whole town was holding its breath. She was 8 years old when the sirens stopped. She said no one ever came to tell them what the test was for. The most disturbing revelation came from a redacted transmission log recovered among the papers. It listed outbound messages from Blackwater to a Navy research division, referencing acoustic field modulation experiments. Analysts confirmed the terminology was identical to that used in the 1944 Operation Echo archives. Somehow, the science of silence had found new purpose in the science of obedience. When news of the rediscovered files reached the public, official agencies were quick to deny their authenticity. Yet, within weeks, digital copies disappeared from university archives. Interviews were cancelled, and individuals involved in cataloguing the documents received anonymous cease orders citing national security. The pattern felt familiar, the same machinery of secrecy, still grinding quietly beneath the surface. Today, historians debate whether Operation Blackwater ever truly ended, or if its lessons simply evolved into modern psychological strategy. The evidence points to a chilling continuity, from wartime experiments in sonic cloaking, to Cold War listening posts, to the manipulation of human emotion through engineered calm. In the words of one declassified memo, panic is a contagion, so is obedience. What remains certain is that Blackwater's legacy lives in silence, in the gaps between truth and trust. It reminds us that history's most dangerous experiments aren't always measured in explosions or body counts, but in the quiet moments when people stop asking questions. Chapter 4. Red Mercury and the Prague Safehouse. By the time the Berlin Wall began to crumble, the Cold War was supposed to be ending. The world was exhausted. From paranoia, from secrets, from the constant hum of nuclear tension that had defined generations. Yet, behind the hopeful speeches and the champagne toasts, something darker lingered in the shadows of Eastern Europe. In Prague, beneath the dust of a collapsing intelligence empire, a story was about to surface. One that proved some secrets refused to die quietly. In 2020, a Czech archivist named Jana Horakova was cataloguing old files for the National Security Archive. The task was simple: box, label, preserve. But one metal case stood out, smaller than the rest, sealed shut, and marked only with a fading stencil. K9, redacted. When Jana pried it open, she expected another stack of bureaucratic reports. Instead, she found 3 glass vials wrapped in lead foil, a packet of coded telegrams, and a note written in Cyrillic. The words translated to, "Do not expose to air, property of Directorate 12. At first, she thought it was a hoax, a prop left over from the SATB's old disinformation campaigns. But lab testing confirmed something chilling. The vials contained trace amounts of mercury mixed with unknown isotopic materials, emitting low but persistent radiation. The findings echoed one of the Cold War's most enduring rumors: the existence of a mysterious substance known as red mercury. For decades, red mercury had been dismissed as a myth, a code word used by arms dealers, a Cold War ghost story. It was said to be a dense, blood-red compound, capable of catalyzing fusion reactions at room temperature, or stabilizing miniature nuclear devices small enough to fit in a briefcase. Western scientists scoffed. Soviet defectors swore it was real. No one could prove it, until now. The telegrams inside the Prague briefcase revealed communications between Soviet research officers and Czech intermediaries in the mid-1980s. They spoke in riddles and technical euphemisms, but one phrase appeared repeatedly: delivery through the corridor, immediate containment. The corridor, investigators later determined, referred to an underground network of transfer routes stretching from Chernobyl through Bratislava into West Germany. a black market artery for moving unstable materials beyond the Iron Curtain. The more archivists decoded, the more dangerous the picture became. The briefcase had been hidden in a section of the SB headquarters that was sealed in 1989, days before regime collapse. Whoever left it behind wanted it buried, not lost, but waiting. Among the recovered pages was a receipt bearing signatures later identified as belonging to scientists associated with the Soviet nuclear program at Azimuth 16. One of those names also appeared in American intelligence. Documents on defection recruitment during Operation Paperclip's final phase. It seemed that red mercury wasn't just Soviet, it was traded, tested, and shared. Modern analysts reviewing isotopic residue from the vials confirmed it wasn't a hoax. The samples showed unusual mercury isotopes with trace contaminants of lithium deuteride, a potential indicator of advanced fusion experimentation. Whatever the Soviets had been developing, it was far beyond theoretical chemistry. It was controlled madness. Jana's discovery set off quiet alarms across Europe. Within weeks, men in dark suits arrived at the archive. The briefcase was confiscated under the pretext of hazardous materials control. Jana herself was placed on temporary leave, but the copies she had made, high-resolution scans of the telegrams, began circulating through academic networks and online forums. The phrase red mercury returned to global headlines, but this time it wasn't myth. It was evidence. Historians piecing together the recovered. Files found links between red mercury and a series of untraceable financial transactions routed through Swiss banks in the late 1980s. The funds moved through East German front companies registered under innocuous names like Technometal GmbH and Vega Consult. In truth, they were cover operations for Soviet research exports, part of a shadow economy designed to preserve scientific assets as the Eastern Bloc crumbled. One ledger listed a payment for 5 units of stabilized compound, Prague route, December 1987. Each unit priced higher than an aircraft. The buyer's codename, Harbour. Some speculate it was a Western intelligence cutout. Others believe it was a rogue faction within the Soviet apparatus itself, trying to safeguard what remained of its empire. As the years passed, red mercury faded again into rumor. But the Prague Safehouse files made one thing unmistakably clear. Something tangible existed. Something so dangerous that it warranted decades of denial. And those who touched it rarely survived long enough to explain. In 2021, one of the Czech technicians who handled the original vials fell gravely ill. Radiation poisoning, according to medical reports. He refused interviews. Before his death, he told a journalist only one sentence. It wasn't mercury, it was alive. Whether he meant chemically reactive, self-sustaining, or simply uncontrollable, no one knows. But when his statement leaked, panic spread through the scientific community. Governments moved swiftly to suppress discussion. Yet the silence was too familiar. The same pattern of concealment seen in Echo, in Vault 7, in Blackwater. Different nations. Same instinct. The Red Mercury affair reminded the world of a truth most historians already suspected. The Cold War never really ended. It simply went underground, into sealed rooms, unmarked crates, and forgotten safes waiting for the wrong hands to find them. Today, the Prague Safehouse stands empty, its windows barred, its basement filled with concrete. Officially nothing remains, but late at night, under the hum of the city's streetlights, residents still claim to hear faint metallic ticking from beneath the pavement, as if something below is still reacting, very, very slowly. Chapter 5. The Buried Train of Lower Silesia. The legend began as a whisper, a tale traded by miners and treasure hunters, passed down in taverns and over campfires. A Nazi gold train, sealed somewhere in the mountains of Lower Silesia, carrying the Reich's final fortune to safety as Berlin burned. For decades, no one believed it. It was a ghost story of greed and defeat. But in 2024, the Earth itself gave up its secret. And the truth was far more complex than gold. Ground-penetrating radar revealed a vast tunnel system near Wałbrzych, Poland. What appeared to be a geological anomaly was, in fact, a rail line encased in concrete, an artificial tomb stretching deep beneath the Owl Mountains. When archaeologists and military engineers breached the tunnel, the stench of rust and oil filled the air. Floodlights flickered against armored steel. There it was, a locomotive, silent and sealed. Its iron skin pitted by time, but unmistakably intact. The emblem of the Reich still visible on its flank. The discovery electrified the world. News channels called it the Train of Gold. But when the cargo doors were finally opened, there were no jewels, no coins, no stolen art. Only crates of metal cylinders, disassembled engines, and stacks of technical blueprints wrapped in oilcloth. Stamped across each box was a single code name: Operation Sternberg. Historians had never heard of it. Military archives contained no mention. Yet, the recovered documents spoke of a relocation effort ordered in April 1945, days before Germany's surrender. The train, it seemed, had not been built to hide wealth, but to move research. And not just any research. Inside one crate, investigators found the half-melted remains of what looked like a propulsion chamber, fused alloys, wiring, and notes describing guided aerodynamics through acoustic stabilization. The phrasing was eerily similar to the recovered notes from Operation Echo. Piece by piece, the puzzle began to form. Sternberg wasn't a last-minute treasure run. It was a mobile lab, a desperate attempt to preserve advanced technology before Allied forces could seize it. The Reich scientists had loaded their most secret work onto that train: experimental weapons, jet prototypes, and acoustic data from Echo's final experiments. When the war collapsed, the train was diverted south, into the mountains, and sealed by explosives from within. The question wasn't just what they were transporting, it was why. Among the blueprints was a small leather-bound ledger. Inside, a list of names. Some were known German scientists, others Argentine, a few American. Each entry followed by coded references to post-war relocation. Historians quickly recognized the pattern. Operation Paperclip, the US initiative that brought hundreds of German engineers into American service after the war. Yet several of these names had never appeared in declassified records. They had simply vanished, as if swallowed by the same darkness that buried the train. As teams catalogued the site, they uncovered evidence of human remains near the rear carriage. Not soldiers, civilians, forced laborers, chained to their posts. The last witnesses to Sternberg's creation. Autopsy analysis showed they died of carbon monoxide poisoning, the result of the train being sealed and ventilated shut. The message was clear. No one was meant to know what lay within. For months, the Polish government tried to maintain control of the discovery, but the secrecy fractured quickly. Intelligence agencies from the US, Russia, and Germany quietly requested access. Unmarked convoys appeared at the site. Within days, the tunnel was closed again, officially for preservation and safety. Unofficially, most of its contents were removed under cover of night. What few pieces remained in Polish custody told a story that was as haunting as it was undeniable. Sternberg's engineers had been working on acoustic propulsion, an early form of directed energy based on sound waves. It was primitive, unstable, and wildly dangerous, but decades ahead of its time. In one surviving document, a German physicist wrote, "We do not control the sound controls us." His handwriting trembled across the page. The discovery tied together threads that historians had followed for nearly a century. Operation Echo's sonic cloaking, Vault 7's Arctic surveillance, Blackwater's psychological conditioning, Red Mercury's unstable isotope research, each a fragment of the same dark pursuit, the manipulation of vibration, sound, and energy as instruments of power. Across generations, across borders, the technology evolved, inherited by new governments that denied its origin but eagerly used its results. In the years since, the WWII tunnel has been sealed again. Officially, it's a restricted archaeological zone. Yet satellite images show continued activity. Faint heat signatures, occasional movement of equipment. Locals say at night, when the wind moves just right, you can hear a deep hum rising from beneath the soil, low, steady, and mechanical, like the breath of something that was never meant to wake. The buried train of Lower Silesia is more than a relic. It's a warning, a final echo of an age when human ambition outpaced human conscience. For all our progress, the question remains the same. What have we truly buried, and what still lies waiting beneath our feet? Because history, like sound, never really disappears. It only fades, until someone listens again.